Right. First of all, I did notice there was something very wrong with the color. It's never been like that before, so maybe it somehow wasn't compatible with the setup here, so I apologize for that. One of the things that really astounded me from the time that I started writing the book is when I thought back over the years that for at least 8 years, Angela was a drug addict and I had no idea. I didn't have the foggiest notion. There were no clues, there was no outward signs. Her behavior seemed normal. She had a partner, she had a very good job, and everything was fine. She lost a bit of weight, but just because your child loses weight, you don't start to think, my child's a drug addict. Before I found out about the drugs, there was the gay part of it that came into the story. I wasn't going to write about that. I was going to write about drugs, and I called my book Catastrophe. And the reason I called it Catastrophe is because my daughter was on a drug called CAT. C-A-T or K-A-T, K-H-A-T, it's the same drug. It's a terrible drug made up of chemicals, swimming pool chemicals, pool acid, rat poison, and a million other cocktails go into this highly dangerous and very addictive drug. When I sent the book to the publisher, who's Melinda Ferguson, who's just written an amazing book now called An Accident Waiting to Happen, Melinda published my book with Jacana. Melinda said, I don't like that catastrophe. Why don't we, your daughter's gay, you must write about that, and we're going to call it Oy vey, my child is gay and an addict. Well, I nearly had a fit, and I said, definitely not. I'm not having that, but being a first-time writer, I had to go with the flow, so I went with the flow, and the book became Catastrophe, Oy vey, my child is gay and an addict. When Angela was 16, she met a very nice boy. She went to King David's School, met a very nice boy, and they were an item for 8 years. And in that 8 years, I had absolutely no reason to suspect that my daughter was gay. Now, there's various schools of thought about gay, and the way I see it, I'm not saying it's a fact, it's the way I personally see it, that being gay is part of your DNA. And as well as being a photographer, I'm also a genealogist, and I study families and their history, and I do family trees. And if I find one gay person, I can assure you that there's a gay uncle or an unmarried auntie somewhere on the family tree. It is genetic, in my opinion. Angela has an older sister who's gay from another marriage. They have the same father, different mother. And Angela's also got a first cousin who's also gay. So from 2 brothers in the family, they have 3 gay children. So that tells me, it backs up my little theory. So I didn't suspect that my daughter was gay, and I was very much looking forward, as everybody does, to the big wedding and the bridesmaids and the whole retinue and the wedding dress and grandchildren, and I knew this was going to come, but I was wrong. And where I blame myself is that, unbeknown to me, Angela knew that she was gay. But because of peer pressure, she kept it back from me and from my mother and from the community and the family, and she suffered over this, as I can imagine a person would do. Again, I didn't have a clue about this. And eventually, when the boyfriend started to get serious and propose, Angela then knew, look, this is it now, I can't carry on. So she broke the relationship. She didn't tell me why. She said she had issues, and I had to just accept with those issues. And my mother, of course, was devastated, and eventually Angela came out and told me she was gay. But by then I knew, because people were coming and telling me. They saw Angela with this particular girl who's known to be a gay girl. They were holding hands. And when I asked Angela, she said, oh, it's just a phase. So on one level, I knew. I mean, I'm not a stupid person, I knew. But on another level, I thought, no, it can't be. Eventually, she told me, and I didn't handle it very well. I'm quite ashamed to say. I was devastated. I thought my world was over. There's going to be no husband, no grandchildren, and it was all about me. And I was being selfish, And I didn't stop to think about Angela and her feelings and how she had suffered all these years. I knew that I would have to accept, and I wanted to accept Angela's lifestyle because, first of all, she's my child and I love her. And secondly, where is it going to get me by not accepting? It's going to make an estrangement between me and my family. And I think that anybody who's family conscious, and as a Jewish person, we are particularly family conscious, I knew that I was going to have to accept it because I wanted my daughter more than I didn't want her to be gay. So I made up my mind. I think I made a very good job of it. And I introduced myself to Angela's friends. I started going to gay movies with Angela. I photographed gay weddings, women marrying women, men marrying men. In the beginning, I was sort of like laughing to myself, like inside, but after a while, it became so normal. You know, and I remember this one wedding that I did, and the groom was a woman. There was a groom that was a man and a groom that was a woman in a blonde wig, and everything was lovely. And I actually began to think of this guy as a woman. And I found myself saying she and she, and everything was fine. And when I did the wedding pictures, there's no way in the world that when I edited the pictures on the computer, that I could see it was a man, except for one thing that neither he nor I thought of. He had a 5 o'clock shadow, which came out over the makeup as the day wore on. And there was nothing I could do. There was no amount of editing that I could fix. This little beard was like sticking out. But I saw the humor in it, and I embraced all Angela's friends, and I'm fine about it. It doesn't mean to say that I don't sometimes wish that I would have grandchildren and my line continued, but it wasn't to be, and I just got on with it because there's no point in dwelling what could have been. It wasn't. This is it. I'm happy. Angela was dating a very nice girl, a lovely girl. I liked her very, very much. She's mentioned in the book as girlfriend, and then she's called fiancé. They got engaged. And round about this time, I started to notice things in my home were missing. Now, this is inevitable when it comes to drug addiction. It starts off, as I see it, everybody and a lot of people, certainly in primary school and in high school, people experiment with drugs, whether it's dacha or whether it's cocaine. Many, many people will use a little bit of drugs. But then it becomes two groups. There's those who can't stop and those who do stop. And my own partner told me he's had quite a few little concoctions when he was growing up and even into his 30s. But he stopped and got married and he had children and just moved on with a normal life. But there are those who get stuck, and these people, like Angela, they suffer with the disease of addiction. It is a disease. It's not just a condition. It's not just somebody like me. I like chocolate. It's not a disease that I love my chocolate. I'm addicted to my cell phone and to my computer. Addiction it's called the disease of addiction, and I do not profess to know everything about it. In fact, I know very little. I'm trying to learn, and I go on Google and I read books, and I'm trying to arm myself with the knowledge. What happened to my daughter? Why did she have the drugs? She said it was, she didn't want to think of certain things and it blocked certain things out. But I think everybody has things in their life that they don't want to remember and they don't want to block out, but drugs is not an option. So, as I say, I'm learning about the drug addiction, and I'm learning to be happy now that my daughter has got all these clean years behind her, but what happened in between? As I said, I started to notice things were missing from the house. Small things. My partner at the time said he's missing deodorant. Toilet paper was missing from it. Stupid little things. Then I missed a cell phone. Then I missed an iPod. I never missed any jewelry, but then I started to miss money. And who else could it have been? I left out a little part. Sorry, it's not always easy to tell it in chronological order. Angela's, sorry, you'll have to help me with the one part. When you were living at the house, when did, okay, sorry. Okay, Angela moved back into the house. It was an established fact that Angela was using drugs. And how I actually found out in the end, and I wouldn't believe it, was I phoned her boss, her ex-boss. Because Angela was going through a stage of moving house every year, changing jobs all the time, and she had wonderful jobs. She's very clever. She's graduated cum laude, which you would have seen on the video. She's not a stupid girl. Every 5 minutes she's changing her job. And the one time, and I didn't suspect anything, she waltzes in, guess what, I've given notice, the job is too much, the hours were wrong, my fiance is not happy, I'm working too hard, and there'll be lots of jobs out there. I said, you know, in this climate, nobody gives up a job until they've got another job. No. I did nothing about it, but I was wondering, and I phoned her boss. And I said, please tell me why Angela left the job. So she said, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that question. I said, well, I've asked, and now you've got to tell me. And she did. She said, well, things were missing and things were disappearing, and Angela was seen in the toilet with a white powder. Now, I thought that was cocaine, because although I'm not a drug user, I've seen enough movies, and I know what cocaine looks like. It's like this white powder. It happened to be not cocaine, it happened to be cat, but that's a hair-splitting thought. So I went to Angela and I said, because all these strange things, I said my money was disappearing, my cell phone, another cell phone disappeared, and I went to her and I said, you know, what is this? Your boss said that you were seen in the toilet with a white powder and that money was disappearing from the office, and big money, and foreign exchange money, and everybody in the office's credit cards were being used. And she said, no, she's just got it in for me because I left. None of that is true. So what do? Believed Angela. Believed her. I thought, phew. But I've said on the one hand, I'm quite an astute person, and nothing just escapes me. I notice things, but yet I was in denial. And that is one of the things that is very prevalent throughout my book. I was totally in denial, because when the facts were presented to me, I chose to ignore them. And then there was a drug test that went wrong. She went off. I made her have a drug test. She came back. There's the results. Everything tick, 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 all clean, lovely. I have a sixth sense. I went to Ireland on a holiday, came back, not happy with the drug result test. I don't know why. I can't tell you. It looked beautiful. I phoned it was a Morningside clinic. I phoned the laboratory. They can't give out privileged information. I said, I'm coming in with this test. I need to know. They said, don't come in. I went in, and they said to me, this is not a genuine test. It was forged. So what happens to a lovely, sweet person, whether it's a little girl, boy, whether it's somebody's husband, father, whatever, that takes away their value system, makes them lie to their parents. She never lied to me before. She never went near my bag, never mind took money from me. And this is what the drugs do. So there's nothing good about drugs, nothing. I cannot say one positive thing about drugs and drug addiction. So I decided, after Angela, I'm not going to give the whole book away, but after Angela finally ended up in rehab and she went to Houghton House, I decided I was going to write a book. And one of the reasons I wanted to write this book was because I didn't want somebody else to be me. And because I thought I was going mad. When the money started going missing, who could it have been? It certainly wasn't my partner. It wasn't me, and it wasn't Helen. That's the lady you saw in the video. She's my domestic. I knew it wasn't her. Where was the money? Who was taking the money? So eventually I had to accept it. And why was she taking the money? Because eventually the drug habit becomes more expensive than what they're earning. So for the 8 years that I knew nothing at all about her, she was earning very well, and she was spending her money on the drugs. But as the drugs take hold of the victim, the money runs out, the expenses go up. So what can they do? They do what all drug addicts do. They steal from their family, from their friends, they pawn stuff, and eventually they either go to prison or they get better. And they get better in rehab. or they die. Sorry, that's very important. I don't have to convince you of that. You've all heard about Robin Williams. You've all heard about people, all the movie stars, Heath Ledger. I could mention a whole load of them, that they can be clean for 10 years, for 20 years, but the drug addiction, if they don't go to their meetings and they don't work the program, they relapse, because it's an ongoing, it's not just, oh, I'm better now, I'm off the drugs, you know, that's it. They have to work the program, and Angela will tell you about that. So that is a fact. A friend of mine lost her son. She wouldn't believe that he was an addict. And I said to her, it sounds very familiar, he's using something. She said, oh, no, he's not that kind of boy. 4 months after we had that conversation, he died of a drug overdose. It was a terrible thing. I wish I could have done something more, but I could, you know, it's very hard to convince somebody that your child is a drug addict, because people don't want to see that there's something wrong with their child. Whatever it is, they don't want to see that there's something wrong. And I'm the same. I couldn't accept the fact there was something wrong with my child until the facts just hit me in the face. So I'm going to let Angela talk to you a little bit. She will talk to you more about her side of the story and the drug addiction, because she knows more of the facts about drugs than I do. And thank you for listening, and I will be taking lots of questions, I hope, and whatever you want to ask, I'm quite happy to be quite open, because it's got to be honest and upfront, otherwise, you know, why am I here? Okay, so over to Angela.
Thanks, Mark. So I always find it really difficult to talk to a bunch of virtual strangers about my shame, my guilt, like the raw stuff that kept me in a very sick place for a very long time. You know, I go to 12-step meetings. It's called NA. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. You might have heard of AA. It's a sister fellowship. It's called Narcotics Anonymous. And I go to meetings on a regular basis, and it's very easy to sit with a bunch of other recovering drug addicts and talk about the shit that we've done. Sorry if I'm on TV. To talk about the bad stuff that I've done, you know, the stealing, the lying, the cheating, the manipulating, the dishonesty, the forging of lab reports from Morningside Clinic to say that I was clean when I actually wasn't clean. It's easy to talk to like-minded people who have done the same thing, because that's what addicts do. You know, we might use different drugs, but we share the same disease. You might be a drinker, you might be a gambler, you might have a sex addiction, food addiction. The list is long. You know, addiction is not just about drugs or alcohol. It's, for me, it's anything that I can take or do to take myself out of myself, so I don't have to feel what's going on inside. My brain is wired differently. You know, they say that addiction is a disease. A lot of people struggle with that concept. It made it a lot easier for me to understand what was wrong with me, because I couldn't understand why I always felt different to everybody else. Because my brain is wired differently. I see the world differently, and I don't have a stop button. I'd like a stop button. It would be really nice for me to have one drink and say, I've had enough, I want to go home now, but that doesn't happen to me. One drink turns into, you know, a few days later I wake up and I've robbed my family blind, and I've pawned my grandmother's jewelry, and I've done some really shameful and hurtful things with no conscience at the time, because the need to use my drugs is more important than what other people, you know, other people's feelings, and respecting other people's property or homes or whatever the case may be. So I suffer with the disease, and when I was able to get my head around that, you know, my brain is wired differently, and the World Health Organization recognizes addiction as a disease. There's a list of criteria. I'm not Google, and I can't give you that list, but if you guys are interested, you can always go into Google and see why is addiction classified as a disease, why medical aids will pay for it if you need to go into treatment. And initially there was a lot of stigma for me attached around addiction. You know, if I wasn't so ashamed of it, and ashamed of all the things that I'd done, I would have long time ago gone to my family and said I need help. But my pride, my ego, and the fact that there was so much shame around it stopped me from going to my family and saying I've got a problem. I kept changing the goalposts, so I didn't think I had a problem until maybe if I use, you know, every day, then it's a problem. And then it was, well, if I only use after work, it's a problem. And then I started using after work, and then I started using during work, and then it was all, if I start missing work because of my using, and then I started missing work, and then if I start stealing from friends, I started stealing from friends, and then it was if I steal from family, if I steal from work, and I kept pushing those goalposts because at the end of the day, the disease was greater than me, and I was not in control. I'd like to think that I'm in control, but I'm not. I want to go back to the point that I made a few minutes ago about addiction for me is drugs and alcohol is a symptom of my disease. So in other words, I use the drugs and alcohol to not feel pain, to not feel ashamed, to not have to deal with the pain that sits inside. And I think that a lot of people use drugs or alcohol or gamble or cut themselves or overeat or starve themselves or gamble or whatever it is so that they don't have to deal with what's actually going on inside. So I know for me as an addict, I didn't have tools to deal, like everybody's got trouble in their lives, everybody's got drama, but non-addicts tend to have a way of dealing with it better, and people that suffer with a disease like me, we struggle. I struggle. Having come into recovery and learned or follow a 12-step program, I've been given tools that it's possible to stay clean and sober. I don't need to use drugs or alcohol anymore. I've learned to communicate. I've learned to express how I feel. You know, for me, it started really young, and from a very young age, I knew that I was different. I knew something was wrong. I thought it was first that my parents got divorced when I was really young, and that all my friends' parents were married, and that made me different to them. That wasn't the case. I thought then that maybe there was something wrong with me because all my friends, all my girlfriends liked the boys, and I liked all my girlfriends. And sure, that did make me different, but it wasn't what defined me. It was something was different inside. There was always, they call it a hole in the soul, and that I can relate to. I always felt like I had a hole in the soul, and I needed something outside of myself to fill that hole. And so I would fill it with alcohol and with drugs, and it made me do some really shameful and hurtful things. And one of the biggest consequences was that I never really got to mourn the loss of my sister. I lost my sister when I was 29, she was 19, to meningitis. And instead of mourning and grieving, the loss of my sister, I was using drugs to numb that pain. And I carried on numbing that pain. I'm not saying that's the reason that I used, but I used that as an excuse to carry on using because it was just easier than actually taking responsibility and accountability and feeling the pain. And one thing that I've learned is that no matter how bad the pain is, you always get past. Nothing lasts. This too shall pass, and the only way out is through. And I've got to get through the discomfort, through the pain or whatever it is, to get to the other side. And tomorrow is another day, and I might experience pain tomorrow. But today I know how to deal with that pain. And today I know that I can communicate. I've got people that I can talk to. And what recovery has done for me, how it's changed my life, is that today I am a responsible, accountable person. If I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'll be somewhere. I try not to be late because I think that's just disrespectful, and recovery has taught me that I need to respect myself first and foremost and to love myself first and foremost, and then I can love other people. If I can't love myself, I can't love anybody else. And recovery has taught me and shown me that I like to treat people the way that I would like you to treat me, and that would be with respect and kindness and loving and gentle and patience and tolerance. And those are the spiritual principles that, it sounds like a cult, doesn't it? But those are the spiritual principles that I learned when I go to Narcotics Anonymous, which is really just a fellowship of like-minded people that understand me and have been where I've been and help me to stay clean and sober. So I think I'm going to leave it there, and then you're going to open it up to the floor for questions. Thanks for letting me talk.